Hello and welcome to the Tuesday, March 2nd meeting of the Finance Committee. Pursuant to the Governor's order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Laws, Chapter 30A, Paragraph 20, as well as the Select Board's emergency order dated March 16th, 2020, the Finance Committee will be using remote participation for this meeting. The audio of this meeting is being recorded and will be posted to the town's webpage within 24 hours in accordance with the Governor's emergency action requirement of keeping the public informed of actions during this meeting. I would ask that all participants remotely attending this meeting please state your name for identification purposes each time you speak throughout the meeting. At this time, I will take a roll call of attendance. Mr. Maxwell.
Here.
Mr. Alfred.
Here.
Ms. Zemer.
Here.
Ms. Desessian.
Here.
Mr. Whitaker.
Here.
Mr. Murphy.
Here.
And of course, I am here, so we are now called to order. So before we get to the budget reviews, quickly, did everybody get the minutes? I know they came out kind of late this week, but did everybody get a chance to review those?
So I did get a chance to look at it, and I've exchanged a few emails with Mark. Surprisingly, I actually did read these just as soon as I got them. And Mark does a great job with the minutes, but I did suggest that maybe we include a little bit more of a fulsome discussion of the or sort of summary of the discussion with the governance committee. Normally, I like to keep the minutes short and as sort of high level as possible while still staying, fully within compliance with the law. But in this case, I think it may be better to sort of have a little more detail.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
Would you like to write a summary to include in the minutes? It's like if you want to help Mark with that, or
Mark and I will work together on figuring that out. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, then I guess we will postpone voting on those minutes. Yes, Mr. Maxwell.
Mark, I hate to be a nitpicker, but if you're in the document revising it, can you put a 0 on the figures where there's no leading 0? So like there was a 0.69 year-over-year return on the first page under the paragraph with Leslie. If you can just put a 0 in front of that decimal.
Absolutely. Yep.
Such a geek.
Well, it's technically correct, so you're right. Any other comments on the minutes before we move on? Okay, there's no other administrative matters that I know of pending, so we can move right to budget review number 1, which is the Board of Assessors. So I don't know who's going to be speaking. Who's going to be presenting for the Board of Assessors? Because I see Mr. Barbieri and Peter, are you going to be talking for the Board of Assessors, or?
I actually wasn't planning on it. No.
Okay.
I mean, it certainly hit it. It's a question, but
Maria, you're on mute if you're trying to
Kathy would probably present it.
Okay.
Hi, Catherine Pierce here from the Board of Assessors office. This year, our FY22 budget has quite a few different things added to it as a result of fixed maintenance. I don't know where you want me to start with this. If you want to start from salaries or just jump right.
Well, the salary side, I mean, I guess, is there anything notable other than just on the salary side, just point out anything that's not standard, right? It doesn't look like there's anything there that's non-standard except a not decline in clerical. Do you might want to explain, was that turnover that happened there? That was,
we're not putting money in there to hire an extra part-time person.
Okay, so then if that's the case, then everything seems fine in that regard. So just go on to the professional services, which is clearly the big nut in this budget. Okay, so our professional services this year, we have a lot of maintenance funding as a result of Tyler Systems coming on $8,000. And then in addition to that, we are contracting with RRC, which is our personal property contractors who did our contracting last year, which is $1,500. In addition to that, the utilities valuation, which we discussed last year, which was an unfunded mandate by the Department of Revenue, and the lowest price we could get on this when I went out to bid and to talk to other companies was $2,000 per account. We have 2 accounts. So that's a $4,000 hit. And very likely we're going to have to request a transfer at the end of the year to cover it for FY21 because of
how this came on last January, I believe it was. Kind of caught us off for 2 fiscal years, 20 and 21. And then finally, we have inspections that still need to be accomplished by the end of fiscal 22. There's 684 parcels. I have a couple of colleagues who are assessors in other communities who give the town of Holliston a really good bargain of picking them up. It averages about $30 a parcel. Tyler will do the same service for $75 a parcel. So this is an estimate to accomplish those parcels by the end of the fiscal year. So that's the big hit in that. Everything else is relatively level funded. So that's where we are.
Okay, so I guess I have some questions, but I'll let the rest of the committee go first. So, and if you, as you know, just raise your hand in the Zoom if you want to ask something. So, Mr. Alfred, go ahead.
Yeah, so here we are, March 2nd, and I do want to talk about the stipends. Obviously, there was a stipend committee, and they came back with a recommendation that was accepted without comment by the select board that, you know, given sort of, it stated anyway that there's a requirement that you do annual 1-week certification every year, and that they basically backed into that based upon the annual salary or average salary in Holliston. But I've done some digging and looking around, and based on comments actually that when we discussed this last year, I believe that there were only required courses for the first year of getting on the assessor board, and then after that, it's you know, useful, helpful, but certainly not mandatory. So can you just shed some light on that?
Within the first 3 years of a member being elected or appointed to the Board of Assessors, they're required to pass course 101 and the classification hearing in order to sign the recap sheet or any other documents in voting for the board. So it is a one-time shot, and it stays with the board members. But as all of you know, education changes, you know, the legislation changes at the drop of a hat. And although I try and stay up with that, it is helpful for the board members to attend courses from time to time, although it's certainly not at the same expense of UMass.
Sure. So what is involved in that first time, that one shot sort of deal? Because
I recommend that the board attend UMass. You can take it online, but okay. One of the best parts of going out to UMass is meeting with other assessors and being able to network and to understand and to really get a grasp on the impacts and the importance of the job. So when you go out to UMass, you have seasoned colleagues, you have members of the Massachusetts Assessors Association, and you have every level of assessor who is taking this class. Brand new appointees, brand new electees, people perhaps with an axe to grind, people who just know nothing about assessing and who are walking in the door. And you've got the Department of Revenue there. And the Department of Revenue will just basically educate these people, you know, who are coming in, that assessing is not a function that is of a political nature. We may be politic, but we are not of a political nature. We have guidelines that we follow. We have requirements that we are forced to meet. And if we don't meet them, then the whole town suffers. So, and it's really important for them to experience this out at UMass. My recommendation, my experience, has always been to send a board member out there. And
that's great. And look, that makes a lot of sense. But it is not required, correct?
Oh, it is required. Well, not to go,
No. Going to UMass and doing
is not required.
residency program, which was the basis from from my, based on my reading and of the stipend committee's work was what they sort of based the sort of underpinning of the $2,500.
Course 101 is required.
But you can do that online.
Yes.
Now,
At
whether they go
UMass.
back to UMass is a question in the future.
Right.
Well, could you do it online 2 years ago?
Yeah.
Okay, so you could do it online before the pandemic. Is the point? This is not a pandemic only thing. So my point is that the underpinnings of the stipend committee's work, I'm not sure how they arrived at this. We're going to talk to them at some point, and I'm not trying to, I'm certainly not pointing any fingers, but appears to be somewhat off of what the actual reality of the situation is, which is that you don't need to actually take a week out of your life to go to UMass. It may be beneficial. I'm not arguing that. But if you're saying that by being an assessor, you have to go take a week out of your life and potentially either use vacation time or unpaid time, and that because of that, then the town is going to pay you a stipend to sort of cover that. That doesn't actually really exist because you can still meet your responsibilities without going. So let me just say this because it is March. It is March 2nd, and last year there was, and I can see the point, but there was some concern that the stipend issue came up at the last minute. I'm telling you, I'm going to just notify you right now that I will be voting against the stipends this year. And I don't know how the rest of the board feels, but it's March 2nd. Town meeting's not till the beginning of May. We're now on a 2-month runway. And given the fact that you are, 8% above the guideline, reducing the stipends is actually a good way of getting us to that point, and puts us in line with, basically puts your board in line with where the rest of the boards are in town. I would just say we are offered opportunities to go to financial meetings all the time too. And, certainly continuing education is valid. And I think that if you would like something in your budget to pay for the fee for board members attending different educational seminars and opportunities, I'm all for that. But a stipend payment directly to board members, unless we're going to go and start. I thought that the stipend committee was going to do this. Unless we're going to start doing this for other boards in town, I can't support that.
And just as a general comment, obviously the select board accepted the report without comment, and they have not themselves discussed further action. So I think that's, to your point about it being March 2nd, all I would say is that obviously the select board themselves hasn't finalized what they are thinking in that regard.
My comment there was only that last year we were told that this was a last minute thing. You didn't give us an opportunity. And I'm just sort of saying,
correct,
it's not a last minute thing this year.
No, I understand that. All I'm saying is I'm concurring with that and saying, just to be clear to everybody on this call, that the stipend committee has delivered a report that was accepted without comment by the select board, but the select board themselves has not, acted on or discussed or further, and that may happen as well between now and then.
And nor did I say they were. I'm just saying that but this is the assessors have voted on it.
Got it. Okay. I just want to move forward. Okay. Anything else, Dan?
No, that's it for me. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Murphy, you were next. Got to unmute.
Yep. Sorry. I just have a couple questions, Karen. I know you said it, but what's the difference between Tyler Systems and, sorry, let me just pull it up again. The inspections, is Tyler doing the inspections, or that stipend you put in there for $20,520, that's for the people that kind of volunteer and give the town a good amount?
Well, they don't volunteer. We're paying them approximately $30 a parcel. We have a schedule where if they get in, they get one amount, and if they don't get in, they get another amount. So, but the average is about $30 a parcel. Tyler charges $75 a parcel to do this.
I see.
So, and Tyler is for the software only. This year, last year we contracted with Tyler for the recertification for the commercial properties. So does that answer your question?
It does. It's more of a comment now to Travis and the accounting department. I've suggested in the past we break out from professional services, software, and leases. And I know under GASB, they have an exposure draft, and they're probably going to make everybody break it out. So I would suggest, and I would like to have software broken out from professional services. I think it's commingles in, and it's really, it does a disservice to the looking at the numbers, in my opinion, because you're not looking at professional services as software.
Right.
The other thing I have a question is utilities valuations. That can be an annual thing, or is it just one time, like so many years we have to do it?
Well, right now it's a mandatory annual thing. And when we've mentioned it to the Department of Revenue and said, no, we can't afford this.
Yeah.
And given them a little bit of pushback, they say, well, then you're not going to get certified and you're not going to get a tax bill out and you're not going to do this. And on top of this, we're paying $4,000 a year. And granted, we got a ton of growth out of it. We still don't know if we're going to get appealed.
Yep.
So.
Oh, that's great. Plus, how much does it really change from year over year if they want us to do it every year? It's crazy.
Well, yeah, I know. I mean, the first bump last year, we got, I think, 17 million, which was pretty, I think $10 million of growth from these two accounts. Will we get that every year? No.
Okay. All right, that's it for me. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Nersessian.
Yep, I just wanted to follow up on some of Dan's questions, if that's okay. Is the Umass training a one full week?
Yes.
And you had said that you suggest that one board member go with you?
Not necessarily with me, but when we get a new member on board, a new person who's elected, we recommend that person go out to UMass for that week.
Okay, but then on an ongoing basis, does anyone attend?
There are courses out there, and because we have recertification of our own credits, occasionally we've sent people out there, staff members.
Okay, but not board members?
Not unless they request. Every year they get the syllabus just like I do. Mm-hmm. So if there's something of interest, they could even go for a day. And there are other programs that are available throughout the year.
Okay, and is that something they pick up the cost on their own, or does that get charged back?
The course out at UMass, the town usually pays for.
Okay, so no matter whether it's a board member or not. Do we know when the last time a board member went?
I think it might have been Leslie or Mary. Leslie had already taken it, I guess.
I went.
Yeah, I had already taken it.
This is Pete Barberry. I went in the mid-90s, and then probably maybe 10 years or so, I went back for course 301, which was the commercial appraising aspect of it, which assisted tremendously in doing the commercial stuff that we do.
Okay, so in the 90s and then the 2000s was the last time. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Zimmer.
I just wanted to know the utility valuation. Is it like power lines or
NSTAR Gas and NSTAR Electric, or EverSource. Sorry, EverSource
right.
Gas.
What exactly is it that they're valuing?
It's everything on poles or underground.
So, like, if the town would, so if that's not changing, if like if new poles aren't being put in, why does it have to be done every year? I guess
It's okay. So the methodology has changed in the last year, which is why the mandate came down the street. It used to be that NSTAR or EverSource would submit to the town a letter that gave us a value. It was a net book value, and it gave us the amount of growth, and we had to take it. That was straightforward. We just had to take it. No arguments, nothing.
right.
Within the last couple of years, there was a court case that came down. I'm going to say probably 3 years ago, because the Department of Revenue had to have time to write their guidelines and determine how to value this stuff. And they changed it. So it's a part net book and it's part Something very complicated that I, quite frankly, don't even want to know about. But it's a new methodology, and I, I mean, I'm not going to be here around. I'm not around long enough to know learn it.
No, I guess what I'm saying is if the inventory doesn't change from year to year, what changes from year to year that we have to pay year to year to have it done?
I think that it's very possible that some inventory does change,
Okay.
but I honestly don't know, Michelle.
All right. It's not like they go out and they say, oh, this pole looks like it's leaning a little. Its value isn't what it was last year. It's not like
No, the poles are counted and they're depreciated over time. And there's an expectation that they're going to be replaced. It's got something to do with the use and other things that I just don't honestly know. And because we've only had it 1 year valued, I don't have anything to compare it against.
Okay. All right. There was their question, and also I had another question. I don't remember what it was. I think it was just if it was year to year, but you answered that with Vin already. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I have just a couple of questions, Kathy. Thank you for presenting all this to us as usual. One thing I was curious about with all this revaluation stuff was if you go way back, right, like both of us do, you remember the days of the famous spreadsheet where you used to show me the spreadsheet and I'd say, how long does it take to get an entry in for every line, because we had the 10-year cycle through actual inspections and so forth. So I'm trying to understand what the requirements are. Like when we look at a budget like this, where you say we have to do 684 parcels in FY22, how did that end up happening? In other words, is this a case where we should be on a more regular cadence of inspections or evaluations and we got behind? Or is it that, that they changed the rules and they're making us, because I know that the Municipal Modernization Act actually extended the time from 3 years to 5 years for the reval, right? So,
right, but that's not inspections. The inspections are over a 10-year period,
right?
And so, part of what we did have some money set aside. Part of the problem is the budget period. I usually bring my guys on in the spring. I get them to sign a contract for the upcoming fiscal year, and then I end up trying to spend. And first of all, the budget that I have, I sort of wait to see what's going to happen with the courts, because if I have one court case that's commercial, that could wipe out all of that professional services monies that I've set aside for collection. So I wait to the end, and then what happens is I try to encumber whatever I've got into the summer months, which is when most of my people are doing their work. So I've encumbered, and I did have at one point $8,000 encumbered that I guess it used to drive the accountant somewhat crazy to see this encumbered amount. And we would not finish until September or October. And in 1 year, we didn't finish until November. And so she was sort of trying to advise me to just use it. Just use it. And if we needed transfers for a case, then we'll get transfers for the case because they're not really expected. So we've been sort of juggling the schedule as to how we've been doing it. In addition to that, we've had a lot of changeover with our assistants. We've probably had 3 assistants in the last 10 years. And, getting people up to par on what you're going to do for inspections. There's the recyclical portion, then you've got your permit portion. And on top of that, we've had a lot of growth. And when you have a new house, you just don't go out there once. You go out there about 3 or 4 times. And particularly with the condos, you've got 66 here, 66 there. We're out there. I mean, I know last year Kelly spent a lot of time, probably not last year, but the year before, a lot of time out at the condos. And it's consuming because they're just adding pieces to each unit, and you have to stay up on top of that. So it's taken time, And we,
Okay, so I guess the fundamental question is, if we know today, for example, I know that new growth kind of distorts this a little bit, but I guess what I'm saying is, if we know we have this 10-year cycle to see everything, right? If we come to a year like this where we say we've got 684 to see, I guess what I'm trying to understand is, did we not plan well enough to even out the load over the 10 years to say, okay, if we assume that there's X number of new parcels being added on, you look at new growth and say every year we have to inspect, I'll just make up numbers just for argument's sake, right? Let's say we have, 5,000 parcels in town, and every year we get 100 more in new growth, right? So then you could sit there and you could plan out and say, okay, well, that means that if we're going to end up with, 1,000 new parcels over a 10-year period, then we have to be averaging, 600 parcels a year in inspections so that we can cover 6,000 parcels over the 10-year period and meet the requirements, right?
Mhm.
Are we doing that? Because when I look at this, that's my only concern, is that it seems like we're behind, and I'm just saying, is that behind because we got, behind because of the pandemic, or because we didn't plan well enough to make sure we could follow a more steady pace to do it?
I think the pandemic has a little bit to do with it. We might have been able to shave off maybe 200 or so in the last year. But I think that transitions and the way that budgets fluctuate, sometimes that money had to go somewhere else. Sometimes it went to software. Sometimes it went to court cases, or it went to the attorney that we hire from time to time. And if I had $5,000 a year to spend specifically on recyclical, that would be awesome. But, we've never asked for that before. I've never felt like I've been in a position where I really could ask for that before. I try very hard to keep the budget as level as possible and to try and get my staff to get out there and do that work.
Right. So just that leads to a follow-on. That was the next question I was going to have, which is, of the parcels in town, what percentage end up getting inspected by in-house staff, and what percent, do we do half of them on our own and we contract out the other half, or is it 90% in-house and 10% external contracts? I mean, I'm just wondering if just a ballpark.
Well, I know that Kelly does about 500 or 600 a year, and then and that includes sales, permits, and a portion of recyclical. And then if I have money, then I contract the rest out for recyclical. And as I said, because it fluctuates a little bit, some years I don't have a lot of money to give them, and some years I have a lot. And then when I was doing the encumbering, I would lose that money. So I had a time limit on it. And sometimes you can't push your people out in the field when you're contracting with them and they're doing a favor sort of, as a colleague, to do this work for you. You can't push them to go out in bad weather, So, I mean, it's a juggling act.
All I would say, I mean, we don't need to, I think I've made the point. I think you've given me all the information I need, so I thank you for that. But what I would say is, what I would suggest, probably to your board, not to you directly, although you'd be involved, is I know that I would rather see a well thought out plan for revals in terms of how we're going to meet the 10-year guideline, factoring in expected new growth, factoring in how many we do in-house in a year. And I personally would more than likely be in favor of having a separate budget. If there's a certain amount that has to be done in external, contracted inspections every year, I would certainly be more in favor of putting together a budget that had that regularly, where you weren't just relying on patchwork in the budget, because it is something where, if we get behind, we end up with something like this, where we have a whole bunch that have to be caught up on. And I've always been much more in favor of having a well thought out plan that's funded more, in a more level headed way, sort of level funded way over year to year to get the job done. So, that just homework for you and the board, I guess, if you want to look at that.
Yep.
And this is Peter, understand that. I mean, that's what it is. I mean, we're in the range of 500 to 600 on an annual basis to get us to roughly the 5,000. So having 673 is not that far off of where our plan was, bearing in mind the inspections we couldn't do over the last year. So you're right. There is a plan for 500 or 600 on an annual basis, either, roughly in the range of 500, at least by staff, another 3,030 bucks, another $1,030 by, or 100 by outside consultants. So there is a plan for 500 to 600 on an annual basis where we need 673. So we're not that far off typical.
Yeah, because to Vin's point about breaking it out, I'd rather see that instead of just lumped in professional services. I'd rather see a line that said, inspections or something that that broke that out separately and would fund it on an annual basis. So it's basically $30 a pop for inspections. That's what you're saying.
Well, that's what I've been able to negotiate, but I have to share with you that sometimes these people aren't available. I'm working with colleagues who are full-time assessors in other communities.
Mhm.
And I'm talking $30 a parcel versus $75 contractual with a reval firm. So, if my guy isn't available for 2 months in the middle of the summer, well, that's my best time. And I don't have time to go find another person to do that work. Plus, I'm up against that encumbered fund thing. So, we've been trying to do the best we can, but I would love to see an allotment specifically geared towards this, because quite frankly, to even ask for 20,000, to have 20,000 to do this, it's kind of a nightmare to try and schedule these people and get this all done.
Well,
it is work, but I'd rather do it over a period of time, certainly.
right. And there's another point I wanted to make with all this, which is if we have a certain spend that we're spending externally every year, it starts to beg the question of, do you have part-time help or something, or do you start looking at, I'm not saying that the answer is to hire somebody. It may be still much cheaper to contract it out. But the thing is, you have to start looking at those types of things and saying,
Right.
if we don't have the capacity and we can't get the people when we need them, or we have to pay $75 for the contract, do we start looking at what we might need to do the staffing to adjust that, if that turns out to be a cheaper option, right?
Right.
Hiring a person may not be the optimal thing to do there. But Mr. Alfred, you had something.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to see if I understand this, because the way this looks, it looks like the 684 is what you have over and above the 500 to 600 that you're able to do a year from in-house. So isn't it really that you have like 1,200 to do this year?
No, that's what I've got to do. I've got to finish that by the end of fiscal 22.
Okay, but if you're doing 500 to 600.
Okay, so in addition to doing analysis of the sales, going out and looking at the sales, looking at the permits, and we've been quite busy doing that. And then this would be the portion that is geared specifically to recyclical. These 600 have not been visited.
Right, I understand that, but you normally have to do 500 or so a year that you've been doing, right? As part of the recyclical annual number, right? So
that's in addition to sales and. So,
right, but the question is, of the 10-year recycle, we have to do every inspection in town. So what we have left to finish off the 10 years is 673, right?
Yes.
So it's not our normal 500 plus another 673.
Okay, but then I guess why do you need to farm out all of those? Aren't you normally doing some of those internally based upon the budget that you've had?
We've been doing a portion of the recyclical, but this is what, when I was able to estimate out of how many there is an additional amount that we have to look at.
But it's not 680.
No, there's going to be staff in-house stuff. And plus I was going to have the board go out and look at the condos again, because, to go up to Turner and go through the condos and some of those buildings is a really good, thing for the board to be able to do. And they have done that over the years on a regular basis.
It seems like you're asking for a lot of extra money that I'm not totally understanding the explanation for. And I guess you just alluded to my next question, though, is if one of the reasons why historically we've been saying we've been paying the board is that they've been doing assessments, is the board out into the field doing assessments? I mean, you break up the 680, they can do 200, each of them can do 200 assessments on their own, and then we don't have to pay anybody.
So when I mentioned the condos are pretty straightforward, okay? You have 700 square feet, and after you look at 3 of them, you pretty much have seen all of them. So they can really judge them, going through them as to what the differences are within each unit that they're able to see. A 700 square foot apartment condominium versus a 4,800 square foot house that was built up on Old Cart Path is a completely different animal.
So our Board of assessors are not out evaluating individual residential homes.
They're not grading houses. They're not measuring houses. They've assisted with that in the past, but they do condominiums. They'll do the condominiums.
And how many condominiums do we have in town?
We have over 600.
So about 10% of total households in town are condominiums.
We have, yeah, that sounds about right.
So just 10%. Okay. So here's what I would like, if you could, over the last 9 years, let's just say, since the last recyclical, I would like to know how many units per year our internal staff, including the assessors and everybody, did per year. And then we can sort of see what, in theory, your capacity is per year. And we can back into what we think you're going to need to actually outsource. Because I do not think that if 680 is, or 684 is really the total amount that you have to do this year, there should not be any reason why 100% of that needs to be outsourced.
Right. I mean, right. That's, so as I said, I think we've made the point. I think that the board and both Kathy understand what we're after here, which is we want to understand how much of the work is being done in-house, how much is being done contracted, and look at the 10-year period to see how many were done over the last 9 years that led to this. Because Dan's point is the obvious one, which is you're saying that you're outsourcing every inspection this coming year, and that is at odds with the idea that, it's at odds with the idea that you're doing a certain amount in-house, right? Because it implies you're doing nothing in-house, and that's really where the disconnect is, right? So we just want to understand what the numbers say in terms of how many can be done internally.
I want a number each year. I don't want sort of, it's been about this. I mean, I want to know the exact number that we've done in-house for the last 9 years each year.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't have it on me right now.
No, I understand.
No, that's follow-up work, Kathy.
Yep,
Kathy,
yep.
We don't expect you to do that right now.
Unless you have it on the top of your head.
Right.
No, I'm kidding.
Any other questions for the assessors? If not, then we should move on, give them a break, and let Youth and Family we went over a tiny bit, but that's all right. Okay, I don't see any other hands up. So thank you very much, Kathy. We appreciate everything you do for the town, and keep up the good work. And certainly the Board of Assessors, thank you for joining us tonight. You guys don't have to stick around if you don't want to, unless you really want to hear about Youth and Family Services and our other budgets. But okay, I see Jackie. Jackie's made herself visible, so she's clearly ready to go. So Jackie, are you going to be handling this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So I'm Jackie. I'm the Director of Holliston Youth and Family Services. And do we want to just pull up the budget, or how does this work?
I see Travis looking at like he's about to do it. There you go.
All right. So, the budget, the administrative salaries represent about 95% of this budget. We separate that out from operating costs, that's 8%. You will see under part-time salaries an addition of $5,414, and that's because we have a clinician going out on maternity leave. So this is for part-time coverage for FY22, it ends up being about 10.6 weeks that we'll be having that coverage there for, and it is a grade 500 step 1 position because it is a master's level position, and that rate is $26.19. And so that's kind of that impact there that you'll see on the salary side of things. Down to professional services, there's an increase there of $2,326, and that was for our Theranos account, which is our electronic medical record, which was necessary for us to do with the work from home orders that we had in early March. It allowed us to streamline all of our documentation so I could see sort of what staff were doing and paperwork that was being done. And then we added on a feature of telehealth with that, a HIPAA compliant platform with Theranos. So that amount was covered by CARES Act money and will need to be reflected in our FY22 budget. So that is the increase under professional services. Dropping down to communications, there was an increase of $550. And that also had to do with sort of our need to pivot with the sort of challenges of COVID and our job. So we have a phone system that we have 3 phone lines, 4 voicemails. We added on a subscription service so that we could receive calls to our cell phone. We had gone back and forth about what the best route to go with that would be, whether it to be to carry our own work phone, our own work cell phones, or to find a different avenue to be able to receive calls when we were out in the community, because we're seeing a lot of families at their homes or in the community. So we needed a way to be accessible for safety reasons, but also to be available for calls that were happening when we were not in our offices. So that is the additional charge you see there. Office supplies and professional development remains the same. Professional development wise, obviously at the beginning of the year, things changed and people had to move their, continuing education programs online. When it comes to counseling CEUs and psychology CEUs, social work CEUs, they differ a little bit from other professions. Usually they're intensive programs, so they're usually over 3 days. There's usually a certification process that happens at the end, so you walk away sort of with a certification. And I just recently did an EMDR training. There's 2 parts to that. Just to give you a sense of kind of those costs, my first part of my EMDR training was $445. So the second part, and we have 2 staff, so you can kind of see where that money goes very quickly. But other than that, that is Youth and Family Services budget.
Okay. Mr. Maxwell, I see your hand up, so we'll start the fun with you.
Thank you, Dr. Seda. Jacqueline, thank you for the continued service to our community. It's a very valuable and important activity that we conduct for our residents. I have kind of 3 questions. Around the administrative assistant salary, what's that $14.90? Is that a step change?
Okay, so I think that there was an accounting mistake that happened. Kirsten's step increase happens July 1. And so it was not reflective last year in my budget. So we had to incorporate that we had to make sure that that step increase was incorporated in her salary.
Okay.
Well, just one follow-up quickly before you on that, Tim. So does that delta, just to be clear, Jackie, does that delta represent adjusting for the misstep, or does she get another step this July 1 and we're going to have the same problem again?
Every year she gets an increase.
Right. So this represents the catch up for the misstep plus the step she'll get in FY22.
I don't know. I don't want to say yes or no because I don't know the definitive answer. I can follow up with.
Yeah, I would definitely check that because, as I said,
this was Sharon double checking it, so I believe it should be fine. There is on this sheet that got uploaded. I fixed it before we put it up on the screen last night with the select board, but there's just a calculation error in the summary as it is online, so I'll fix that. But Sharon, that number came from Sharon, so it should be good, but we can double check it with her.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're not making the same mistake again, Yeah,
I don't want to give you the wrong answer, so let me follow.
Okay, go ahead, Tim. Sorry to interrupt.
No need to apologize. Good follow-up question. For the temp salaries, you did a good job of explaining why we need it. Can you get into the calculation a little? So you mentioned an hourly rate, I forget already, 26 an hour?
26.19.
How did you get to 5,414?
So times 19.5 hours times 10.6 weeks.
Okay, thank you. Perfect.
Yep.
And then my third question was about the software Thank you for the explanation about what it was. Completely understand why you needed it. Is that a recurring cost that will incur every year moving forward? Okay.
Yep.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ken.
Thanks, Tim.
Okay, Ms. Zemer? You're on mute, Michelle.
I was wondering, the person who's on maternity leave, why the Mass Paid Family Medical Leave Act isn't paying the salary instead of the town?
We don't have mass family paid leave. We are exempt as a local government agency. If the town would like to opt into it, which I would recommend, that's something to consider.
It's such a small amount. I
Well,
forgot
I
what
think that we're not going to answer that tonight. I mean, that's something we're about
Okay,
to.
all right. I just thought we opted into it. It would have paid for itself right now.
I'd be happy to support that and looking into that for this town.
Okay, I was just surprised when I saw that her salary didn't go down and, okay.
Yeah.
There was, and then my other question was just, I saw that in the Holliston Reporter for the mortgage and rent thing.
Yeah.
I know that that's this fiscal year, but I was just, if you can just give us a very brief of how that's going.
Yep. So we did, through the CARES Act money, we were able to allocate some money for rent and mortgage relief. We've done 2 rounds at this point. We are looking to do a 3rd round of another $25,000. We were able to help 27 families in Holliston with rent and mortgage relief. We've provided $50,000 in support. Demographically, 95% of those families that were given support were single family households with dependent children at home. And that had a lot to do with how we prioritized needs for rent and mortgage relief. We were really trying to help families. So we used the schools broadcast system to kind of get the word out, and sort of went through the school to help kind of generate an interest in that program. And it was incredibly successful. The state now has 2 programs that are up and running, RAFT and IRMA. And so folks who potentially applied for rent and mortgage relief might be, it might be advantageous of them to look into RAFT or IRMA to be able to see if they qualify for it, because they have about $10,000 that they're giving per family for rent and mortgage relief. So we just want to make sure that families know that those 2 programs exist and that families aren't also double dipping kind of between the 2 programs. So it's in our guidelines, it's in our application. We ask if they've received IRMA or RAFT. We ask about any subsidies they're receiving, but it's important that, we get that information out there because there's lots of doors right now for people to get help. So the state program is offering a lot more money than the town of Holliston with regard to rent and mortgage.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle.
Okay, Mr. Alford?
Yeah, so just staying, I guess, on the mortgage relief, it sounds like it's gone very well, and it's great that we've been able to help so many families. And I appreciate you working a little bit with me last summer to make sure that we made sure that the people in most in need were able to get it. Or you guys were. So yeah, with all the other programs, though, I guess I was surprised that you were considering a 3rd round. Especially given that last year you said that it was only going to be 2 rounds. And so I'm just sort of wondering what the thinking there is. And I realize this is a select board question and decision. But obviously, if we run out of CARES, then it sort of turns into a town decision, which, brings us into the equation.
Well, there is CARES Act money available. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that, as we've always wanted with this program, it was designed to help families that didn't qualify for some of those government funded programs. So we have a lot of families in Holliston that aren't meeting that poverty income guideline, but they're not making enough to make ends meet. So this is a hand up, not a hand out for families in need. So that's the idea behind going after another round of funding for rent and mortgage relief.
So I guess the initial thought was that you saw that there was money left, so that sort of spurned the thought of asking for more. I'm just trying to, because the money that is left still, at least as of now, because we don't have a new relief bill from the federal government, is still supposed to last us through the remainder of the year, not the fiscal year, the calendar year.
The idea behind asking for another round of funding is because families are still hurting. And so there's still a need in this town for our support with rent and mortgage relief.
Understood. Let me ask you a question. Because $25,000 isn't a ton of money when you start divvying it up, but we're hearing a lot from the schools about all the issues with kids and with COVID, not COVID sickness, but the whole COVID pandemic related issues, right? And mental health and awareness. If you had $25,000 generally that could be sort of said, claimed it's COVID money, but that it wasn't necessarily, you need to dole it out to families, but you could hire a part-time staffer or help kids going through mental, kids going through tough times, right? What do you think is the best? What would be your top priority? Would it be helping up, families, or would there be a way of sort of reallocating that to help youth in the schools that are going through tough times?
Dan, don't forget, families who are in need, who aren't able to pay their rent, are struggling. That causes mental health issues in the family, and that bleeds through to kids as well. So I don't want to.
I'm not trying to say it's totally separate.
I'll let Jackie answer the question, but I just want to level set that. You can't split. There are separate COVID issues, right? Because that everybody is dealing with, but those families who are focused on trying to retain and stay in their home, that's a stress level that is on top of that, and that bleeds down to the kids as well. You can't ignore that. So
understood. What I'm trying to get at is, how do we get if you only had $25,000, how do you make it go as far as possible with making the greatest impact?
I understand. And we'll let Jackie answer. I just wanted to add that. So.
Yeah, all I can say is that it's a basic need. Families need housing, they need food. And when you have those two things, a lot of other stressors and issues intersect with that. So, we're talking about not just a rent or mortgage problem. We're talking about a lot of problems within that household that are happening once you get to that point. So even though it feels like, we're just helping families stay in their homes, it's actually doing a lot more than just that. It is tackling mental health issues. It is tackling substance abuse issues. It is helping people in a DV situation get into a safe housing situation. So I would argue that it's doing exactly what you're talking about. It's being spread out, and it's doing what it needs to do to help families.
Okay, I was just wondering if you could hire a part-time counselor, if you could reach more families that way. You know what I'm saying? Just sort of.
I think that's a separate conversation for another time in terms of our hiring needs. It's not helpful to hire somebody just for 8 months because then what happens when that person can no longer have a funded position? We lose that support. It's not really sustainable for our department to have a pilot position through the CARES Act. But it is, I appreciate, sort of your thoughts there, but it doesn't make sense for us to have a part-time person funded through the CARES Act. My
last comment is really more of a request, I guess, or just a favor, I guess. There is a more money. So I was trying to find it. I think it's $30 billion or something like that in the 1.9 trillion or whatever bill that hopefully will be passed within 2 weeks. Before we start, my only request, and this would be to Tina as well, is that before we start spending more of the town's limited resources on this, we just sort of see what's in that package, not only for mortgage relief, but also what's going to be coming to the town for the rest of the year. And I'm not making a judgment call, but if we are just 2 weeks away, and I know for some people that is a long time if they're struggling, but it's just to sort of get a better picture of sort of what the situation looks like.
Okay, I'll let Travis go, and then I'll get to Tina because she has her hand up. Go ahead, Travis.
You may be saying the same thing, but Youth Family Services, I believe, is taking this up next Monday night. Select Board obviously meets next Monday night, so I would say potentially by the time this gets to the Select Board through our process, it would be about 2 weeks, which I think lines up with what Dan just said. I just want to
They're going to them on Monday night. They wouldn't vote for this on Monday night.
we're both meeting at the same time on Monday night. I would say that this probably gets to the select board the following week, but I could.
You broke up. You were breaking up. You were static. I couldn't hear you. So what did you say again?
Youth and Family Services and Select Board both meet on Monday night, so I would expect this to be on the Select Board's agenda the following Monday, which would be the 15th, which it sounds like lines up with the timeline you just highlighted. I just wanted to point that out.
Oh, okay.
Ms. Hine?
Yeah, so I just want to say, Dan, to your question about mental health, I mean, Jackie, I think, is well aware, as is any town department, that if they identify a pandemic-related need, to present it to the select board for consideration. And Jackie and I have had some early conversations on some ideas about how the town can address across multiple departments mental health needs. So it's definitely not off the table. I don't really see it as a this or that kind of conversation in terms of a request that Jackie might make for additional rent and mortgage. So I didn't want you to think that we are not talking about mental health needs or that we're making choices of one over the other.
Well, I mean, and understood, Tina, and we certainly don't want to make it seem like we're heartless and this is a this or that situation. But by definition, when you have a limited pool of money, all decisions are this or that decisions usually, is the case. And I was just trying to get people thinking about things, because maybe last summer you told us there was going to be more than just a $50,000 need. There was going to be a $75,000, maybe a $100,000 need. Would it be something that instead that we would have done better off by hiring somebody to, because again, we've been talking, the budget liaisons to the schools have been working with them on their budget, and there's $500,000 basically of social emotional requests in there. I mean, a little less, but there is a ton of need within town. So I'm just trying to think about what is the best way for Holliston to help as many residents as possible. And is handing out cash really the absolute best to impact as many people as possible? I get how it's helpful to those people, and we certainly feel for people who are in need and need this assistance. But again, Holliston is a small town. We don't have the same resources as the state and the federal government. So just trying to figure out what the best way to do it is. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I could just reassure you and say those conversations for innovative ideas are happening, and I think Jackie is actively considering all of those questions and thoughts. So just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Jackie? Okay, I think that the one question I had, just to clarify on the temp, is the employee in question already out on maternity leave? Because you said it was 10 weeks, so I'm just thinking
No,
of
that doesn't start until July 1. So her maternity leave doesn't start until the end of May.
Okay.
She's still working.
Okay, so I'm just thinking, again, it's none of my business about the personnel details. I'm just talking about the planning for the temporary help, right? Because the FMLA says you're entitled to 3 months, 6, some number of weeks. I'm just wanting, my bigger concern is that you said you've planned for 10 weeks. And I'm saying, is that consistent with what will happen, what we'll need to meet the minimum requirements of the FMLA? Because obviously the person may decide they don't want to come back or whatever, but that's a separate decision.
Minimum requirements is 12 weeks for maternity leave.
Right. So
Kirsten we're actually in need of possibly a reserve fund transfer for 4.4 weeks, starting from June to July 1.
This is what I mentioned last week, Ken, in my update, that this was coming in Jackie's conversation. I think Tim touched on it. The amount of weeks that impact the calculation for FY22 specifically does not encompass the entire length that Jackie's looking for this temporary help.
No, I get that. I understood there was some, that's why once she said that it was starting in May, I got that part of it. There are two parts. One is making sure we cover the 12 weeks. The other is do we, and again, this is not, I don't want to discuss personnel issues in an open meeting. It's not our place. But I'm just saying that sometimes somebody will go on maternity leave and will say, okay, I'm not planning on coming back for 6 months, right? And, if it's okay with the employer, they can say, okay, fine, we'll bring you back in 6 months. So my point was, we clearly have the 12 weeks covered, maybe via reserve fund transfer in 21, but are we do our plans, does your budget planning line up with what your best guess in discussing with the employee maybe as to their planned return to
Yes.
work?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I would hope she would return, but you never know once you have a baby, you know what.
Exactly. I mean, obviously there's no certainty here, but I just wanted to make sure that if she had communicated she might be out for longer, that we would budget it for potentially a longer time. So, okay. Any other questions for Jackie? I don't see any hands up. So thank you very much, Jackie.
Okay. Thank you.
We're staying remarkably on schedule tonight.
Jackie.
Jackie.
Okay. So next up is Travis, cover it, Travis, and treasurer. I see that Mary doesn't want to admit who she is, so she just puts treasurer in her Zoom. So I'm just teasing Mary. Okay, so you want to do veterans first, Travis, and then we'll go to the big kahuna of the employee benefits budget.
You also have fuels on here. If you want me to end the night with fuels and vets, we can get Mary in and.
Okay, if you want, you're right. If Mary wants to get out of here sooner, I'm fine with doing them in any order you want. So.
All right, let me pull it up, and I'll just use this as a plug for anyone following along at home that these budgets that the Finance Committee goes through can be found on the town's website. If you go through Finance, Chris Mayo puts these up. It's in the FY22 budget review schedule. You go down and then follow the date, and we are now going to do employee benefits with the treasurer collector. In the highlighted column is after allocations, and if you're following along, well, Mary can walk you through the spreadsheet.
Okay, good evening, everyone. So we have county retirement. We're going to use the after allocation column, and to get to the after allocation, we charge back the Veterans District, the Water Enterprise Fund, and the extended day for their share of costs. So the after allocation amount for county retirement is $2,375,731. Workers' comp, $311,589. Unemployment, we're estimating at $100,000. We're trying to, not knowing what's going to happen with COVID in the schools, we're anticipating some layoffs, but also anticipating some hiring. So we're trying to be prepared and not get blindsided on unemployment. Disability insurance is $35,116. Life insurance, $15,201. Health insurance, $5,506,654. HSA contribution is $52,000. HSA admin fee is $1,500. Employee shared responsibility is $10,000. And that's when the federal government decides to audit our 1095s that we issue. They do it sporadically, so we always plan that they'll hit us with something at some point during the year. Medicare is $555,358. Medicare Part B is $9,200, and that is the Medicare Part B penalty that we paid for seniors who did not enroll in Parts A and B when they were eligible. The settlement for salary account, oops, wait a minute, I forgot, OPEB, $1,456,470. Settlement for salary account is $75,000. Other administrative fees is $15,000 for a grand total of $10,518,819. We have tried to plan for the unexpected in this budget. We are also in negotiations with the PEC on health insurance. So we could see some changes down the road, but hopefully we've taken all of that into consideration in this budget.
Okay, Mr. Murphy, I see your hands up.
Yes, thank you, Ken. Question, why is pension going up 8.5%? I ask is because the actuary evaluation, they had it in 6.5%. So when I saw that much increase, I was a little taken aback.
That is Holliston's share of the pension liability. Don't forget, we have two choices. We can budget for the July 1st amount, which is lower. It would be $2,598,575, but we always budget as if we're making two payments. And we have approximately $36,000 going towards our unfunded liability or into the pension stabilization account that we hope to establish this year.
So, but my question, forget the 36,000, that it's more of, did we actually receive a bill from them, an assessment already? And we know that's what it's going to be?
We know what it is. They have their, if you go out to the MissLuxRetirement.org website, they have the latest valuation out there. So we know what our valuation will be this year, and I think it's out there for next year too, for 22 and 23.
Yeah, the schedule is set for the next 2 fiscal years for the 2.635 overall amount number under the no allocation column. And then Mary's got the allocations to the right, which bring it down to the 2.375. So the increase from 2.14 in FY21 to 2.375 is net of allocations.
Yeah, I'm just curious though. I mean, the reason I'm asking is because I've gone through the whole Middlesex retirement system actuary report, and I only looked stuck at the whole percentage, and they said, oh, everything's going to go up 6.5% for the next 10 years or so. And to go up 8.5%, it tells me that we need to figure out a plan to even out this, because we can't sustain these increases year over year. It's just huge. I mean, percentage wise, it's got to get up to gigantic amounts unless we have some sort of plan to level these things so we're not hitting this all the time. It's just a question and more of a statement for us to kind of talk to everybody that we need to have a plan together. So that's it.
I think the intention that Mary and I have discussed, and I think I've discussed it with liaisons as well, is to bring back the conversation on the retirement system stabilization amount. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think it is a sort of happy medium for the town. One of the options when you are concerned about your liability with the pension system is to superfund it. That means that you got to have a lot of faith in Middlesex. I think there's some trepidation there. At the end of the day, Middlesex, I believe, is going to be who we'll be with for the long run. So I don't necessarily think that's not an option to consider of superfunding. I think the medium option that Mary brought forward last year is the right one for the town, which would be a stabilization fund. It would protect the town from year over year increases without just putting in extra money into Middlesex. I think the legwork that Mary did, finding out, the process that would allow us to have it invested so it can work for the town, the money can work for the town while offsetting the liability. I think we can have that conversation once we move to the warrant discussion through the budget, but I would agree with your overall sentiment, and Mary and I are still committed to that idea.
That's it for me. That's it. Yep.
So Travis, just on that, given that Vince and I are the liaisons, why don't we set up a meeting soon though, so we can get those discussions started with, I think it's Ben, right? From the select board. Just so that we get that done soon, because again, I still have the same concerns, just making sure that money will be spent for that purpose. But again, if we're doing bylaw changes this year, maybe we can, add a bylaw in to specifically state what this fund is that we're going to be doing to make sure that it is used for the intended purposes, so we don't have to do special legislation. But anyway, my other question was, Mary, what is the underlying most popular plan? And I apologize if I missed this. Most popular plan health insurance rate increasing this year?
We have Harvard Pilgrim is, I believe, our most popular one, followed by the Fallon Select plans. Harvard Pilgrim this year, for FY22, has a 4% increase, and both of our Fallon products have a 3.4% increase. The West Suburban Health Group did use some fund balance to help with the rates. Close to $3.3 million was used to subsidize the rates this year. It was a difficult year in projecting rates. A lot of the carriers suggested a negative increase because we didn't have the services because of COVID, but they don't expect that to continue, and they expect a lot of claims this year. So we've tried to buffer for that reason. We had the increase instead of a decrease. Okay, and then we're increasing this a little bit more because we have FTE increases based upon what the schools have been doing? Right. See, we don't know if extended day will be back. A lot of our extended day people, all but 4 were laid off this fall. And a lot of the ones that were laid off did have health insurance. So if they establish extended day again, we'll be having more people go on to health insurance.
Right, but then the schools also did a number of FTE.
Right, they hired health safety monitors and paras, and a lot of them took benefits. We don't know if they're going to be here, not here. That's why it was sort of a difficult budget to prepare, because we don't know what the future brings.
No, when your most popular plan's up 4 and you've brought the budget up 5, I mean, you clearly
We have factored in.
You're ready for it, but it's not crazy.
Correct.
Yep. No, right. I agree with that. It's just a big number to have to put into the spreadsheet.
Right.
Always is. So. Okay, Ms. Emer.
Did you have people whose spouses lost jobs and then picked up family plans?
We had a couple of those, but we also had to go reverse. Our numbers for health insurance are pretty steady. Actually, there was a little bit of decline. Somewhere. Hold on a second. Our health insurance numbers don't change much from year to year. So we go down 5, we gain 5 the next year. It's pretty flat. But we are, like I said, we are negotiating with the PEC. So if we're lucky enough to get them on high deductible plans, I don't know if we'll see a lot more people picking up health insurance. So it's really hard to say.
Thank you.
Okay, one question, Mary. Does this reflect the anticipated changes to the extended day funding formula?
So what we did is, this is based on FY20 numbers.
Right.
So for the current allocations, we are going to hopefully, if the budget will allow, we'll eat some of that money and then add it to FY23. So it sort of flattens itself out over the next couple of years.
So, yeah, I'm just asking, does this budget reflect, I know there's nothing official yet, but you've talked to the school department about how to handle the allocation for extended day.
We met with Keith last week before I presented this budget to the selectmen last night, and it was agreed that we do the 249,000 FY22, and right now FY23 is projected about 85,000, so we'll bring that closer to the 200 range by adjusting the 350,000 for this year.
Okay.
So the MOA is not in place yet. We're going to wait till we get a little further through the year to make sure we can do what we discussed. Then we'll put it in writing so it's all clear what we're doing to smooth it from 21 through 23.
Right, but this budget reflects that, right?
Yes.
That's all I wanted to make sure it was.
It reflects the amount that Keith has agreed to.
Okay. Okay, any other questions on the benefits budget? And yes, it is a large number, and it is every year. And just to clarify what you said a minute ago, Mary, you said that things are pretty steady year to year. That's enrollment figures,
Right.
not the budget.
Right.
So to be clear, the budget keeps going up generally, but the enrollment is relatively constant. So, okay. Anybody last call? Since this is a big budget, I always give everybody a little extra time. Okay, then we're good. So thank you very much, Mary. Thank you for sticking around.
You're welcome.
And, if anybody has any follow-up, obviously you can contact Mary offline or contact Travis. And thank you for the great job you do, Mary.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Good evening.
All right.
Okay, Travis. Do you want vet
or
or gas? Which one do you want to do first?
That's a tough call. All right, let me see which one I pull up first here. All right, so going back to the sheet here, we'll go veterans. There's a little bit of backup documentation, but this is the format, this is Sharon's format, so we'll go with this one. So I am one of 4 board members of the district, the town administrator of Holliston, the town manager of Hopkinton, the town manager of Ashland, the town manager of Medway. So we meet on a quarterly basis, except around budget time where we've been meeting more frequently. This budget is based on a number of components. One would be the benefits, which is what's actually paid out to veterans in the district. We are reimbursed through the cherry sheet on the calculation through the state for that, which you see down below. And the, let me just go down to the actual budget down here. You can see the allocations across all the towns. We also have different, each of the communities supports the district in different ways. We seat this group at $1,750, and the treasurer collector does payroll. All of the costs run through this group budget, obviously, but that's how we support the group through our staff. It is a relatively stable budget. You'll notice that a decrease in capital is essentially offsetting what is a multi-year phase-in of a salary adjustment for the director, which was worked out sort of before I got there, but I did get to be a part of it. I think it's, based on the market data that they had, a good arrangement. I think this whole district works out very favorably for the town of Holliston financially, for the service level that we're getting, for the cost that we're paying as opposed to being on our own. And with that, I will take any questions.
Okay, Mr. Alfred.
You're on mute.
So I guess my only question is more of a surprise comment that we have not been seeing a greater or really any increase in benefits requests. Just given everything going on in the economy and obviously, as we've seen everywhere from mental health to just everything. Is that, you feel pretty comfortable with that 50,000? It really just surprises me that obviously, as for anyone watching at home, we all know these are benefits that we statutorily need to provide. So if someone comes to us and meets the requirements for them, we have to pay them, and then the money kind of flows back in later for whatever we're reimbursed for. So not that we shouldn't be paying them anyway, but I'm just saying, so anyway, my question is more of a surprise, but if you're comfortable with it, that's okay. I'm just want to make sure that we're not under.
Yeah. And so I guess, I discussed with Ken that I would present this budget. I think that's actually a question that would be great to have Sarah Bateman here for, because so what we discussed quite a bit there, she has a lot of data on the needs of Holliston, veterans by each of the districts, honestly, and she knows, when new potential people who may be drawing down on those benefits are in town and not, and she does a lot of great work on that. So what she's basing this on is that it's a very formulaic thing. So your point being that essentially sometimes somebody who maybe not be drawing on the benefit may now, in a time of economic turmoil, begin to draw on it. I think what I would say to that is, she's very aware of who's out there, that's her job, and she's got those numbers flat. So no, she presented this number. She feels it's the right number for this fiscal year, so I'm not concerned about it personally.
Okay. In the past, with other veterans officers, we have been caught by surprise. So,
gotcha.
Okay, Ms. Zemer.
My question was actually very similar. I was just wondering, I know I don't need specifics, but because the benefits is just a line item, but we've never really heard what the benefits are. Are they like medical expenses? Are they housing expenses? Are they reoccurring expenses? Are they one-time expenses?
Yeah, so I'll just send to everybody the backup sort of that goes into what people can draw down on. Again, it's very formulaic. It's all based on what somebody qualifies for. Then it's essentially running through the state. We are the ones, she's the one calculating it and in charge of making sure the disbursements go out, and then we're getting back at the following year through the cherry sheet. But it's really just determining what somebody qualifies for and then making sure that the check is getting processed. But I'll just put it together. There's a number of FAQ sheets and those types of things that I can just send out to you. But let me get that through Sarah to make sure that I get everything to you.
Okay, and like Dan, I just want to make sure that line item is in these things.
Okay, I'll ask her to confirm that. But those are the ones where, especially when you look at the run rate of of where we were, and you see in FY20 we went above that. You know, that was the question that I asked as well, and again, I mean, she just reiterated that she's comfortable with it. So I will make sure that I point that out and then get the FAQs out for what the benefits are paying.
Thank you.
Okay, I just had a couple of quick questions, seeing no more hands. You mentioned that there was a salary adjustment built in here for the director, and you said it was part of a multi-year agreement. And I'd like to know what that agreement is, because this is a 10% jump in 1 year. So I'd like to know what the multi-year part of this is.
Yeah, I believe so. It goes from 70 to 77, and then FY23 would go to 84, and then that is the end of the adjustment. And then that is 84 after that. Somebody muted me and then asked me to unmute. And that's the number that they're trying to hit, right? And so one of the things was, if it weren't FY22, would it all have been done at once? Probably. But, you know, one of the things we discussed was, one, I mean, this is essentially keeping a flat budget. The concern that I had when I looked at it was, I want to make sure, you know, the question that I asked was, I want to make sure that we're not offsetting what is going to be the ongoing cost of the salary by decreasing the capital line that then just bites us in the next following year. And the answer was no. The previous capital needs, you know, that office is pretty much set up now in 1750. And now at this point, what was done by the chair, who is Michael Boynton from Medway, in looking and negotiating the contract, was we believe that the low 80s, mid 80s is the range that this position for the size office it's running of this regional size is the right number. And then after that, it would be essentially COLA based would be the idea. But we certainly,
I mean, I would just, personally, I'd like to see some of the follow-up data on that, only because when the district was formed, I'm not, there's no criticism of Sarah in any way, but every year we have a request that relates to abnormal staffing costs, so to speak. Abnormal meaning not guideline, not following what everybody else is doing. We had a request a couple of years ago to add staff because the statement was made that, well, in a district this size, the guidelines say you're supposed to have another staff member. So now we add that staff member, and now I'm hearing, well, with an office this size, now we need to increase the director's salary, right? So
I don't think it's related to the size of the office. I think.
No, I know it should be the size of the district, right? But I'm just.
No, and I think.
I guess what I'm saying is when the district was formed, right? Presumably, this was part of the calculation, right? And so, you know, again, nothing against the director. She's doing a fine job, but I mean, I do think that, you know, the district has only been in existence for like 5 years or something, and now we're looking at a 20% salary increase over 2 years. That's, you know, a lot of people will go 10 years before they get that salary increase, you know? So I'm just trying to figure out, like, was there a mistake made when the hire was done initially? Was there, you know, has the workload increased substantially? I mean, I just think that I'd like to, you know, you're our rep, so you can dig into this as our town's rep on this. But, you know, I as I said, I just have longed for a year where the staffing costs have a rise in line with what we see across our town, and that hasn't happened yet in several years. So.
Understood.
So, okay, so the plan is just 10% this year and 10% next year, or, you know, technically not 10% next year, but.
Yeah,
you know.
no, I think, you know, I've had to look at this in other towns. I've been in regional and local. It is a very difficult area. As I said, I think financially, this is one of the better arrangements that I've seen. I understand the frustration when we talk about personnel multiple years in a row. Just to that point that you mentioned, while the part-time staff that was previously discussed that you just mentioned was approved, and there is a person who's been there in support of Sarah for a while, and she's very good. The position that you're referring to has been difficult to keep filled. And so we're continuing to listen to the trials and tribulations of trying to fill that position. That does not necessarily speak to this conversation. This is essentially market driven, as I understand. You've had conversations on the town side when it comes to department heads. I would put it more in that category. I understand that doesn't, people don't necessarily want to hear that, but at the end of the day, these types of positions are in the range that we're now talking about, and that was the conversation that we had as a group.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anybody else have any questions on the veterans budget? Okay, if not, then you can cap off the budget reviews for this evening with the fuels.
All right. Chris, if you don't mind bringing up the fuels, because then I can go through my backup documentation.
Let's see. I could probably bring up the fuels if I had it here. Let me see.
Oh, there he is.
Oh, there he is. You got it. Okay.
All right. So I have a slight decrease here. I sent this to the liaisons previously. Essentially what we're seeing, this budget, all of the fuel costs run through central location. We use Fuel Master. You enter, depending on what department you are, as you fuel up your vehicle. The three departments who use fuel but are charged to different sources are the COA, because of their connection with the MWRTA. They get charged for their fuel use. The schools get charged for their fuel use, and then the Water Enterprise Fund, because they're a different funding mechanism. Otherwise, all of the other fuel costs are caught in this budget. I tried to normalize FY20. We saw a huge decrease in usage after April. And even with that, the run rate for this budget is in the low 90s. My recommendation to bring it down to 105 is to leave what I think is a substantial enough buffer of about 15%. We have seen increased diesel and gas costs. At the same point, we're looking at what has been a pretty steady low 90s range for costs at a price range that 2 years ago is probably what we're approaching again. So this is what I have. I understand there may be some. Why not just leave it at 115? But this is based on sort of trying to normalize what we did in 20, and then looking at 21 that we'll probably throw out the window as well, in terms of trying to use that to base future decisions on.
Okay, so I will ask something that I've asked for a long time. That now that you're here, Travis, I will ask you, because I think this will be good in future years. Way back in the Paul LeBeau days, Paul used to, when we talked about this budget, we would talk about the gallons. He'd look at we'd have the numbers for the usage, how many diesel gallons, how many gas gallons were being used in a year, and then we would look at what the budget was in terms of the estimated cost per gallon for each fuel. Right? Obviously, it's a multivariable problem, so you don't fit. But the idea was that Paul, just to give you the example numbers, right? Paul might look at it and say, okay, we use 1,000 gallons of gas and 500 gallons of diesel or whatever over the course of a typical year. And the budget was built by assuming, okay, we look at the pump price we're paying right now for gas is, again, make up a number, $2.20 a gallon, and we're covering for a maximum rate of about $2.50 or $2.60 a gallon to cover fluctuations. So we kind of knew in our heads when we were dealing with the budget what our limits were in terms of gas price increases. So if the prices increased to $3 a gallon, we knew right away, okay, at our typical run rate, that's now going to put us over. So we have to be aware of that. And so that's one thing. You don't need it for tonight. It's not even that relevant. It's a small budget per se, but I think that going forward, that would be a nice way to explain it, to say this is what we used in each fuel, and this is what the budget is built on, assuming this cost per gallon for these fuels, and then we rounded it to the nearest, $5,000 or something. Because then, as I said, it gives us the idea of, okay, if we watch price fluctuations on the different fuels, we kind of know we're covered up to certain thresholds.
And so again, through the Fuel Master, and these are monthly reports that we run and then charge off to each of the budgets. We can look at all of the gas and diesel usage. The problem, as I said, is really just trying to normalize and sort of get back to what we think is what we want to base our budget on in terms of normal quote unquote use. I would say this is a much easier budget when it comes to what you're talking about. The usage, especially if I try to normalize it based on diesel and gas, is pretty easy to do for FY22, assuming we're going to get back to normal. What's really interesting is the other ones, which is schools, which has changed its actual, sort of usage. It's changed its methodology when it comes to vans and buses, right? So this is pretty standard. If we get back to quote unquote normal, I think the 105, based on what is a reasonable assumption of what diesel and gas prices will do in the next year, is a good number in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't disagree with the number. I guess it's just that there are two things that calculation and looking at usage. I mean, I know you see the usage, but for us to see it would be, again, to guesstimate or to know approximately what price we're building in for the fuel. And also, there's a second factor here, which is we're a green community, and so I'm sure you're looking at this, and I'm sure that our green community people are looking at this, but looking at it just in terms of where is our fuel going, and if we're seeing it in certain areas, should we start looking at, okay, what are ways that we can reduce fuel consumption? Are there, electric vehicle options, hybrid vehicle options, or some more fuel efficient vehicle options out there? Anyway, Mr. Murphy, you had your hand up.
I do. I just wanted to say, originally when Travis and I were speaking about this, I didn't realize we had such a large appropriated amount for 2021. So I think 10,000 reduction is not huge, and it's good because as I mentioned to him, I only see the gas prices going up. And as more and more people get out there driving and back to normalization, they will go up more and more. But I think we have enough cushion in there to cover ourselves, at least I hope. So,
yeah, I don't think the budget's in danger. It's just that, as I said, I would just like to. It was so much easier when we'd go into the budget and look at this, and Paul would say, okay, I built in this dollar amount for gas, this dollar amount for diesel, and you just kind of knew, okay, you could then evaluate it in terms of, okay, we have no idea where gas or fuel prices are going, but if he's building it on $2.20 a gallon, then we know that, okay, it's likely to go up, and then we're going to need a reserve fund transfer. You just kind of knew how much cushion you had built in a more real number way than just saying we just added some money. So, okay, Mr. Maxwell.
Travis, how many electric cars do we have and hybrid vehicles?
We have the two go-karts, as they're lovingly referred to as, that are at Town Hall. Those are Nissan Leafs, primarily used by the assessing department and the building department. At this time, we do not have any other electric vehicle in the fleet. One of the things that I sat down and discussed with Chris Mayo, who has historically led our green communities initiatives, and Matt Zedek, is a number of programs that are coming up when it comes to EV charging stations. I think if we're going to expand our fleet when it comes to electric vehicles, we're going to need to expand, obviously, the charging station capabilities. So what also happened with the one that we have now, the agreement that we have for the one in the back of Town Hall, is that we can't charge. So we charge our own vehicles, and then if somebody else were to plug in, we don't charge them for that usage. The programs have sort of flipped a little bit to allow us, if we were going to put in more EV stations around town that might support our own electric vehicles, but also town usage, that we could also work in credit cards. So we've had that discussion. It's actually one that may come up, because if we were going to do that, I may look at a revolving fund or something like that. we could set a rate that would capture depreciation of those assets to replace it over time if we wanted to be, have that type of infrastructure around town on municipal lots potentially. But at the time, at the moment, the only thing that we have are the 2 Nissan Leafs that are part of that grant program, which plug in at the back of Town Hall.
Okay. Have those 2 vehicles made any type of influence on this cost? Have we appreciably or significantly decreased the amount of fuel we're using?
So it's interesting because those are 2 departments, the building inspector and the assessor's office, that didn't previously have a vehicle. So it wasn't offsetting the town specific vehicle. Obviously, if they were using their personal vehicle, which is gas, that is the offset, but it wouldn't show up here to my knowledge. So not that I can point to in this budget.
Okay. Thanks.
Yes, and along those lines, I'd add one more thing, Travis. This is not something concerning this budget, but there's been a lot of talk over the years of the new DPW facility and so forth, and that this would be something to consider in terms of charging stations, whatever. Not that I'm, that's way down the road, but I'm saying that that's something we shouldn't, if we're eventually going to look at building a new DPW facility, we should definitely consider things like support for electric vehicles.
Yeah, it's interesting. So Chris Mayo just told me that the building inspector did have a town-owned vehicle before the go-kart, the Nissan Leaf. So I will try to look into that and see if I can see the correlation. Some of the feedback that I got from a group, was part of one of the groups that sort of advocated for the need for the sustainability coordinator. I know there are other reasons, including going after grants, but I did get feedback after we was approved at December town meeting. The vehicles that were approved, one was a vehicle for the facilities manager. There were 3 police vehicles. The question I got from that group is whether or not those are going to be electric vehicles. The town of Acton does have electric police vehicles. It is not widespread at the moment. I would say in the next 5 years, certainly it's coming, and we need to keep an eye on it. The facilities manager vehicle specifically, we did look at, what would be green community eligible, which led to gas mileage that isn't, sort of doesn't knock you off your chair, but it's an SUV, which was the need that we had. And at the moment, there isn't really an SUV in the field of what we're looking for that is, for price competitive. So I would say all these conversations are coming to Tim's question, but I don't know that we're there yet, especially at the price points that we see. And I mean, it's going to be it's probably going to be driven a lot by the grants we can access.
Okay, any other questions on motor vehicle fuels? Okay, well, thank you very much, Travis. And that segues right into our next segment, which is that completes our budget reviews for tonight. But we now move on to our next agenda items, which are any updates from the town administrator. So Travis, you can continue.
Okay, I think a couple things. A number of the projects that were approved. One of the things I'm going to be putting together soon, and I'll get out to the group, and I'm going to talk to Tim about sort of any of the capital type documents I've been doing for tracking and then projecting. One of the things that was requested is a tracking of all the articles in the last couple of years of where we are, whether they're capital or not, in terms of spending. So I'll have that out. One of the long-standing ones that I know you're all aware of is the town hall doors. If you haven't gone by town hall this week, it is boxed off on the left. It's going to take a little time. It is very time intensive to replace very old doors in the way that we have specifically asked for them to be replaced. But that is underway this week, which I hear all day long for the last 2 days. Additionally, this December, the CPC article that approved the town hall floors, that has started this week as well. So it's been a very loud week in town hall. But those are, great projects. And actually, if you get a chance to look at them soon, they're both very impressive to see. I think I'd probably save the rest to once I'll put it all on paper and send it out to the group. And then, some of the other things I'll be looking to do with Tim is, where the Finance Capital Subcommittee wants to go with, sort of capital documentation, we'll be doing that. Hopefully, now that the select board has got through its budget schedule, although we will have one more budget discussion on Monday, we'll be flipping our focus as you continue through budgets to the warrant. I currently have 30 articles tracking already, and then I think, as maybe this group pointed out, or somebody else with the governance committee pointed out, with the amount of time that will take, I'm thinking we may have a 2-night at least town meeting this year. So 30 articles already, plus one that we know will be long. So that's where we are with that. And then, as I just mentioned, one budget that got pushed to next week was fire and ambulance. There was a substantial amount of resident feedback on the fire ambulance service areas. So the select board requested that Chief Cassidy bring back some feedback based on what we heard on the 25th, which was a Thursday night meeting that we had. So we'll have that on March 8th. UC, police, DPW, and fire ambulance and emergency management on the 9th. So I just uploaded for you the other budgets that are not fire, ambulance, and emergency management, and I'll get back to you on those when I have further clarity. Lastly, what came out yesterday, which I believe just went to the liaisons, and so I'll leave it up to the liaisons to forward, but the town clerk had already presented their budget to the finance committee, and so Liz has a staffing changeover that's coming, and so she's put it out to everybody to discuss how that position may be posted at a different level than it's currently listed at. So she sent that to the liaisons, and I'll let them decipher that information. And otherwise, that is it that I have at the moment.
Okay, and I will point out that we approved the floors at Town Hall in December, and the work started in February. And we approved the Town Hall doors more than 2 years ago, and the work started in February. So just a little side note.
That's what's important.
Yes, yes. Hey, Ms. Zemer, you have your hand up.
You mentioned the warrants. Could you discuss what petition articles there are, if they're going to have any financial impact?
I don't have any yet. I've had a couple people ask me what the deadline is. I would expect to see at least one or two, but I don't have anything in writing yet. I do have a couple. I have a personnel bylaw one that Mary and I are working on, a revolving fund one that I think we've discussed a little bit as it relates to the smaller financial component of the solar, not the large lease amount, the aggregation amount, the potential stabilization fund for retirement that we talked about earlier with Mary. So just tracking all of those gets me to about 30, but I don't have any at the moment in terms of writing as it relates to citizens petitions.
So to that point, do we have the Word version of the citizens petition form on the website yet? Because remember, it's only a PDF, and for someone who's preparing a petition article, it would be nice to have an editable version to be able to type in your petition or whatever, your article, rather than having to hand fill out print out a PDF and write it in by hand.
I do have a Word version. I'll get that up on the website. I'll talk with Chris, who is probably hearing this as well.
And your expectations for 2 nights of town meeting, is that just for the bylaw changes, or is that in its entirety?
I think the town has done more in the high 30s in the past, so I'm more joking. Ideally, I think
we've done typically May is 2 nights. It's very rare if May is 1 night. So.
Okay. I was in jest, but
I was sort of as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions for Travis? Not, we'll move on. Any liaison updates? I will just say, from the point of view of the 3 of us that are the school department liaisons, we started meeting last week with them. I mentioned this last week. We were going to start meeting with them to go over with the budget subcommittee of the school committee to start talking budget. Last week, we really didn't get that much accomplished because the invitation got messed up. So not everybody was there from the budget subcommittee, so we couldn't have a fruitful discussion. But we do have a meeting tomorrow that everybody should have gotten the proper notification for. So we expect that the full budget subcommittee will be there. They're still, as you know, they're planning on, or their scheduled date with us is, I believe, the 24th of this month. They were talking about having discussions with the full school committee, I think either this week or next week or something. They were planning on last week, but because they weren't quite ready yet, they were going to put it off one more meeting. But we should start to get, they've already had the discussion, as you know, that kind of new initiatives meeting where the superintendent's proposed budget is out there. They're in the process of hashing through that to decide how, whether they, which initiatives they want to support, if any, and where they want to go to the full school committee with an initial recommendation. When they have that, when we have that from them, we'll certainly pass it along. And obviously they'll come to see us later this month. But right now they're still kind of hashing through all the numbers to come up with a proposal. And obviously they have ongoing negotiations with several unions. So there's nothing that we know has been resolved on those fronts, but that will be public when it is, obviously. Any other liaison updates? Okay, then next up is Chief Cassidy, the most formal part of our meeting. There you go. Okay, Chief Cassidy, you want to give us the COVID update?
Absolutely. Since my last update last week, there were 6 expenses posted to Munis for the CARES account. So that was about $1,578, which included PPE, grocery and/or meals delivery, accelerated telework capacity, cleaning and disinfecting of public buildings, and hiring and training, which is temporary part-time staff to assist the technology department with meeting moderation. So that's it from a financial standpoint, just 6 entries into Munis.
Okay, and trend-wise, are we still yellow? And
we are yellow for the 5th consecutive week. Our positivity rate continues to decline. Our total number of cases continues to decline. I am optimistic that if we don't have a spike resulting from February vacation, that we could possibly transition to green in a few weeks.
Okay, now, do you have any, I know last week when you talked with us, you mentioned vaccine availability. You were going to some meeting about vaccine availability, things like that.
Yep.
And, again, obviously everybody's reading the news about how tough it is to get vaccine appointments. Do we have any clarity on when people in Holliston might be able to do that?
Yeah, no, I mean, the people in Holliston are fighting the other 350 cities and towns for the same finite amount of vaccine. The good thing that's happened since I was with you last was Johnson & Johnson received their emergency use authorization, and those shipments started on Sunday evening. And there is already some J&J vaccine in the Commonwealth. So the way the allotment is distributed to the states by the FDA, it is proportional to the population of that state or Commonwealth in our case. And so we'll get more doses now because we'll be getting Pfizer, we'll be getting Moderna, and we will also be getting Johnson & Johnson.
Yeah. Okay, good. Mr. Maxwell, you had your hand up?
Chief, I saw in an email from Travis that $15,000 for the C of A was rescinded. What was the story there?
Sure. So the Council on Aging was very responsive to trying to gear up to facilitate individuals 75 and older to not only make appointments if they didn't have the technical capability to do so, but if there was an identified transportation gap, the select board had allocated some CARES funding for transportation costs, and the guidance from the federal government was quite clear about how transportation could and could not occur. Like, we couldn't just hand out a Lyft or an Uber gift card. That wasn't adequate. What needed to happen was we needed to have an arrangement with a vendor that would invoice us and that it would specify, the name of the client who was taken, what destination they went to, what the start and end time was. And so the senior center had been able to identify a vendor that was prepared if we needed to get people down to Gillette, because at the time that they were making all these arrangements, Gillette was going to be the closest mass vac site. Since then, Natick has opened up, and then there are also some other smaller opportunities, pharmacy-based, hospital-based in the region. So the 15,000 transportation funding that was earmarked from CARES by the board was really like worst-case scenario based on estimates from the senior center director. Since that vote was made by the board, the senior center was able to receive a $4,000 grant, which was specific for transportation to from vaccine appointments, and with the ability to re-up a second $4,000 grant if the first $4,000 was used in its entirety.
Have we had to use any of that grant?
So it was just accepted by the select board last night as part of their making appointments for residents. They have been assisting with transportation gaps. One of the challenges with the way the federal reimbursement occurs, if we facilitate transportation by the senior center van using the senior center driver, that is not reimbursable. If we engage the services of a taxi or livery service and they invoice us because it's not someone's normal duty using normal town resources, that is reimbursable. To my knowledge, we have not used any of that grant yet.
Okay. Do you know how many, just run rate, not costs, because I'm assuming we haven't figured this out yet, but have we been able to assist any of our citizens in getting to their shots? Like, are we incurring costs for transporting right now?
So I know that we have facilitated a lot of appointments, and I believe we identified and had been prepared for some transportation assistance. I'm not sure whether or not that was being done with our normal drivers as part of their normal duties and responsibilities. One of the challenges that we faced is there's a long lag time for those appointments. So we may have identified a transportation need that's going to be a week from now.
Okay. Still with the Council on Aging and Transport, but shifting a little, instead of to the vaccination sites, to meal delivery. I know earlier C of A had talked about the increased cost around meal delivery.
Yes.
Is that being covered by CARES monies? Have we seen any increase?
So the board previously had voted to use CARES funds to do a journal entry to cover supplies for July to December of 2020, and also for the delivery costs for that same first half of the fiscal year. They have also had additional votes that would cover both supplies and transportation costs through the end of this fiscal year.
Excellent. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Any other questions for Chief Cassidy? Okay, I'll just end with my usual question, Chief. Are we good on PPE still?
We're great. And I was just reminded via text that I believe that the senior center has assisted with 12 people have been assisted with rides. But again, I don't know whether that was our own resources or whether that was using the outside vendor. But yeah, PPE is great. And I just applied. Deadline was last Friday. I think I got my paperwork in either on Wednesday or Thursday for an additional allotment from another source that would be at no cost to us. So anytime I have the opportunity to get something at low or no cost to the town, I take advantage of that.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chief. Thanks for the good work as usual.
Absolutely.
Okay, last up on the agenda for tonight is anything relevant to FY22, aside from what we've already discussed in the budget reviews. And I'll just leave that off by saying there are no new updates from the state. As far as I know, I check every Tuesday before our meeting to see if there's anything going on.
I did have one question about the stipend committee. Were we going to have a stipend committee
Yes, I'm working on getting them in. As you know, I pinged them after we discussed it. And then there was one of the members had a family emergency, so I waited. I have reached out again, so we'll, hopefully we'll get them in here soon. The one thing I was going to remind everybody, and I don't know if I actually have said this yet, I believe the Board of Select is on for Monday with Senator Spilka and Representative Dykema. Obviously I haven't posted us for it, but I will if I'll probably do that tomorrow just in case, but just if anybody wants to listen in. I don't believe they're going to spend a ton of time, right? Because obviously the board has a pretty full agenda, but I think it's more of less of a Q&A and more of just an informational meeting on where they stand on several things. So might be nice to dial in and listen. Go ahead, Travis.
Yeah, I apologize for not mentioning that. If there's anything that you want them to hit on, just let me know. And I'll just make sure they have it in there. You're right that we're going to try to keep it to an hour for their, and the school committee has also been let know. I don't think that they're going to post, I think they'll be represented there. And I asked them as well. So if there's any questions that you want answered, obviously the financial update has been one that we've asked for, but if there's specific things, just let me know.
Yeah. See. Okay. So just for everybody, go ahead, Tim.
Travis, if they have any information about transport for, it's not just seniors, but anybody in town who doesn't have a way to transport themselves to vaccination sites, I would love to see if they're considering that.
Okay. Any other questions? Anybody have anything else they want to add on FY22? As I said, we kind of know where things stand. Oh, Tina, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, just to Tim's comment there, I was on the Metro West Regional Collaborative call, and there's more to learn, but that was this morning, and there is a state effort to kind of regionalize transportation. There's some federal money, I guess, that's newly available. I hope to learn more in the coming days, week or so about it, but it sounds like because this money's been released, there are efforts now, of just like the last couple of days, efforts underway to get some sort of regionalized transportation services available for all ages. I can update you guys if I learn any more about it, but I think the need is there for sure.
Okay. Anybody else have anything else they want to add on FY22 or anything else for that matter before we wrap up for this evening? Okay, I see no hands up, so I guess I will entertain the motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, that is not subject to debate, so proceed immediately to a vote. Mr. Maxwell?
Yes.
Mr. Alfred?
Yep.
Ms. Zemer?
Yes.
Ms. Nersessian?
Yep.
Mr. Whitaker?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
And I vote yes. That concludes the Tuesday, March 2nd meeting of the Finance Committee. Thank you for joining us tonight. As you know, we will be meeting weekly for the foreseeable future. So our next meeting will be next Tuesday, March 9th at 7 p.m. But for tonight, we're done. So thank you and good night.